and welcome back to Anna Rose Reads the podcast. I am your host, Anna, and if you're not sick of me yet, this is my second time this week that I will be chatting with all of you to introduce one of my most favorite conversations that I've had this year. I do feel like I say that all the time. Genuinely, I really just do love what I do. But anyway, Johnny Compton joins me today to talk about his book, Dead First, and a bunch of other stuff. And I feel like the amount of fun and enjoyment that I got out of this conversation was absolutely criminal. I feel like we just like kind of nerded out about horror and why we love horror and so many of the aspects of the genre that just bring us so much joy. It was truly a really, really wonderful conversation. I hope that that comes through in the recording, but truly a joyous occasion. And Johnny is just one of the best people in the genre to get to talk to him about his craft, his views on the genre, where it's going, what he wants to work on, the stories he wants to tell is just nothing short of incredible. So, yeah, I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to let you all listen, and I'll check back in after. Hello, Johnny. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I am really, really thrilled that I get the chance to talk to you today about your work and, in particular, Dead First, which is coming out very soon. How are you feeling leading up to release?
It sort of happened quicker than I realized somehow. Like
Yeah.
somehow it feels like it snuck up on me, and it's like, oh yeah, that's happening this month. So I'm feeling excited, but it's also kind of not really hitting me yet. And then the tour will happen, and I'm sure I'll be feeling the whirlwind of that in a moment.
Yeah, I'm sure. It always feels like the month of January just like really drags out, and then February hits you and you're like, oh shit, here's the
Yeah,
rest of the year. Here's everything else
exactly.
all
So
at
you're coming
once.
out of the holidays, and things feel like it's a little bit slower, and then it's like, oh wait, this is all the stuff is happening again. Stuff is ramping up. The even like just from a business standpoint, a lot of
Yeah,
stuff in
exactly.
publishing seems to kind of freeze. The kind of the joke is that it freezes basically from Thanksgiving through like the second week of January, which isn't 100% true. I don't want to make it seem like nobody in publishing is working for that long, but there's a lot of stagnation, and then
Yeah, I
when
learned
it
that.
ramps back up, it's ramping up hardcore.
Yeah, I learned that this last year because this has like been the first. So like 2025 was like my first big year interviewing. So then like this was
Mm.
my first full season like trying to schedule and book into 2026. So I have definitely learned about that
Yeah,
publishing schedule, about it going a little quieter over Christmas, which isn't a bad thing. Everybody needs a break, but I do
exactly.
get the hitting you hard when once we're back in the swing of things. Oh man. Well, Johnny, you are probably I love to hear you talk about horror. I've
Mm.
heard you on numerous podcasts. I think your conversation on Neil McRoberts' Talking Scared podcast about The Haunting of Hill House
Mm.
is one of my favorite conversations that I've heard in a really, really long time. I just listened to it for the first time this last fall when I read the book. And I just love the way that you talk about horror. And you've this is Dead First is going to be your third release that's coming out this February. But in case people aren't as familiar with you as I am, do you want to go ahead and just briefly introduce yourself, and then we can kind of talk a little bit more about your work?
Sure, sure. I'm a Texas-based horror author. I live in San Antonio, Texas. I've lived in the South or Southwest adjacent for the vast majority of my life, and accumulated a love of horror and ghost lore and cryptid lore and everything associated with it, both fictional and allegedly true, throughout my entire life. And as you mentioned, this is my third release. This is my third novel. I
Hmm.
actually also had a short story collection release in December, so I've
Yeah.
got four books that have been in stores right now, which is a just complete bewildering dream come true when I say it out loud like that. And it started when I was about 5 years old, this fascination with frightening fiction, and it has continued well into my beyond adulthood now, at my middle aged hood, which I'm probably on the back end of even being middle aged, I guess now. I'm 46 years old, so we'll see what I categorize that as once I round up to 50. But in the meantime, this is what I've kind of devoted my much of my attention to as I look around my room and I see all of my books, my office here that are, I don't know, whatever enormous percentage of them being horror, and then my Blu-ray collection because I'm a big believer still in physical
Yeah,
media.
physical media. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's horror adjacent, I'm also like a little bit of a sentimental sucker. So I have
Yeah.
like The Farewell, which came out however many years ago. It's funny because I'm staring at this stuff and it's like there's Giallo, there's like the bird with crystal plumage. I've got like this Last Night in Soho, which I really liked. I've
Yeah.
got Kill Baby Kill, Mario Bava. I really love that. The Babadook, The Thing, and then it's like The Farewell, which is this very gentle, lovely homage to like a grandmother. And under that is Ikaru, which is, if you've never seen Ikaru, it's a Japanese film from I think the 50s or 60s, black and white film. Kurosawa, remarkable, and will just like completely reframe how you think about what am I doing with my life and am I wasting my time, and also just these sentimental favorites of mine in the middle of all the murder and chaos. So anyway, that's you asked for probably a simpler bio of me, and I gave all of that. So
Oh no,
that's my
no,
nature.
that's perfect because it opens up a really big door that I want to talk about with horror and like the kind of horror that you write, and you phrase it as frightful fiction, which I think is a good umbrella for it to fall underneath, because I mean like there's sci-fi and fantasy where we
Mm-hmm.
kind of get into tinges of all this kind of stuff, but frightful fiction feels apt. But I do think it's really funny how a lot of horror folks, I think we are oddly sentimental. Like we do hold on to the emotional stuff a lot harder than other people. And I don't know that it's never really the negative stuff, like we're not saying that we're spiteful or revengeful people. We're like saps. So I
Yeah,
think
a
it's
lot of
so
us are, I think.
interesting. Yeah, curious as to like your thoughts as to why that might be, but
It's a great question. I mean, horror. If you're like really into it, right? I feel like there's a side, and I'm not trying to judge too much, but there's like a side of horror fandom that I know I grew up somewhat around. That is very detached, I'll say.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And there's like this arm's length, like I'm just here for the blood and guts, and they just like certain types of movies, and it's just like the gore and everything else, right? And I always think of like the movie Scream,
Yeah.
and me being like one of the few people, one of the like most impactful moments in Scream, which one of the reasons why I think it's a brilliant film. It is like this horror satire, and it's supposed to be joking, and there are some comedy elements, so it's kind of being flippant and irreverent a little bit about some of the murders. And yet, that opening murder
Mm-hmm.
where Casey gets slaughtered, and like when she's dying, her parents hear her over the phone, and the music that's playing, the tone that Wes Craven deliberately sets is there to like let you know this is a tragedy. This teenage girl is being murdered, and her parents are hearing it over the phone, and they're gonna stumble into her gutted body hanging from a tree. This is not to be taken lightly, actually, which I think makes the jokes funnier, in my
Oh yeah.
opinion, because you get everything around it. You get the depths of it, and then you get the levity of it. So I think that you have some people who won't even remember that that's like I described that. And they're like, I don't even recall that being an element of Scream at all. They miss the sincerity that helps to punctuate the humor. And then there are people like me, and I'm guessing you, and
Oh yeah.
many
Yeah,
of the many
100%.
many of the other people that we've met in the community, and horror authors who totally get all of that. And I think those of us that are in that category, we're chasing sensation. Horror
Yeah.
is the ultimate chase of a sensation. You're chasing a sensation that is supposed to be unpleasant, and yet, at some point in our youth, in our past, probably we felt it in a way that it became addictive. And the same then applies to every other sensation. So
Yeah.
when I remember watching sadder films, the ones that actually moved me, then I'm like, I want to go back to that to a certain degree. When I remember watching something that's really, really funny, I'm still chasing those sensations, and I remember it. And it's just not I don't try to keep things at arm's length. I want to embrace these feelings as much as possible. And it just so happens that horror, sometimes from a fictional standpoint, I think is the most intense,
Mm-hmm.
arguably I'd say the most intense of these sensations, because I think you can explore within the genre things that are more unfathomable, unfortunately,
Yeah.
than other things. And I say unfortunately because I mentioned Ikaru and The Farewell, and they both surround like death and your relationship with loved ones and loss and grief, and we all have to experience that.
Yeah.
Horror provides us a space to experience something that hopefully none of us will experience, or it's literally impossible for us to experience. I mentioned The Thing. I'm never going to get assimilated by an alien, at least to my knowledge, unless it's already
Hopefully.
happened.
Yeah.
And for all you know, you're talking. For all I know, based on
Oh
the way
God, don't even.
the alien in The Thing operates, I might have already been assimilated, and I don't even know that. But presumably, these aliens don't exist, and I'll never experience that. So I get to stretch my imagination, and I'm extremely fascinated by that, like by the idea of the horrors. As much as I love the horrors that are centered around things that either exist or that we know that people believe in, whether or not you think they exist or not. We know that certain people believe in ghosts, they believe in demons. We know that serial killers exist, so Michael Myers is scary. But something like The Thing is like that. Achieving a fear with something like that is
Yeah.
remarkable because I have no relationship with this concept, and yet it's still terrifying. So being able to chase a sensation and find it there, and you can't really find grief in things that don't exist in fiction. You can't really find happiness or joy as easily. And I always say that, like, a joke on the screen and a joke told in your living room, if it's funny, it's funny. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
But like on the screen or in the page, some things are scary. Some things that you are scary to a certain degree, but then if you imagine it actually walking through your door, it would be like tenfold scarier. And I feel like that's all tied into why we have this feeling, this depth of feeling as horror lovers, because it gives us this pathway to that chase of sensation that you
Yeah.
can't really replicate anywhere else.
Yeah, it's there's like an odd romantic notion to me as
Mm-hmm.
well. Like, I think that the one big equalizer amongst a lot of horror fans is our need or our desire or our comfortability with introspection. And like, like you said, you keep returning to the why. Like, why did I find that so funny or why did I find that so endearing? So you want to go back and revisit and understand. And I feel like that's the greatest mystery of all with horror is because like you said, even though we don't have hopefully a thing alien, plaguing us right now, we still want to understand what we're going to do in that situation. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like this idea of like getting really comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I would love, like I have a psychology background, so I would love to know like what personality trait, like what part of the brain lights up about us wanting to have this greater understanding and connection about ourselves this way because not everybody is like that. Like there are people who
No.
would rather not know. And so I think it's really fascinating whenever there are people who do want to know, who are willing to look at the ugly and the hard and all of that. So it's such a I love to talk to horror people about this because for the most part the answers are kind of the same, but everybody's mileage varies on different things. And it's just really interesting to hear why people come back time and time again, especially writers who craft these worlds and these characters where that exact thing happens, Like in particular, I'm going to bring in your book now, Dead First, the whole entire reason that we're talking today. You create a whole plot about revenge and kind of like love and loss and where you find yourself amidst all that in the middle of mystery and grit and, bigger things like immortality that we're talking, that are at play. It's a lot, but we kind of keep returning to these bigger, questions to settle in with them. And a lot of people don't like to do that, but for whatever reason, we do. And that's a very cool thing to talk about. So I'm going to ask you now to briefly introduce the plot of Dead First so we can talk about this a little bit further in the specifics. And hopefully, I know I hate summarizing somebody else's book. I'm terrified I'm going to spoil it, especially like right after I get done reading it. I'm like, I'm going to slip up. So I always leave that up to the author. Y'all can handle that.
Well, I understand that feeling. First of all, thank you so much for like redirecting the conversation back to Dead First, because I will just get trapped in let's talk about horror stuff. Like
Yeah.
you said that, and part of me is like a little part of me is like the professional side of me obviously is like, yes, I do need to promote my book, but there's a part of me that's like, let's just keep talking about
Do
this
I?
horror
Yeah.
thing. Like, yeah, like this is the fun stuff to me.
I think we can
Not that
do
my
both
book isn't fun.
probably.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
probably can. Not that my book isn't fun. I love this book. I'm very proud of it. But
Yeah.
you're getting a taste of where my brain goes. As far as the summary of Dead First, it's about a young woman who is a private investigator. Her name is Shyla Sinclair. She gets hired by an eccentric billionaire to find out why he can't die. And during her first meeting with him, he proves that he's not just crazy and just saying that this is a thing that he believes about himself. He, along with his assistant, explicitly prove by having his assistant stab him through the head and then him instantly healing and surviving that it is true. He cannot die, seemingly, and he says he does not know why, and he does not have memory of his past beyond a certain point, and he's hiring Shyla to dig into information that she can find about his past and unearth the reasoning behind his seeming immortality. She takes the job because he's offering a lot of money, but even more so than that, he implies that he knows a dark secret that she has been holding on to for a long time, and she's afraid that this powerful man could blackmail her if she doesn't agree to do this job for him. So she takes the job in order to protect her secret and ends up in a lot of very scary places and situations along the way.
Very well said. Much better than I could have ever done. There's a reason that you are the professional. Um, First of all, I love Shyla. I just want to say that off the bat. Really, really
Thanks.
love her. But I wanna ask a very specific nitpicky question about the beginning of the book. And like the whole interview is not going to be like this, but I just have to know, how did you land on how Saxon Braith, this egocentrical millionaire immortal person, how did you land on the demonstration that was given to Shiloh? Like, out of all of the ways, like that just feels like such a big sandbox for a horror writer to play in. You like if you were given the prompt, how am I going to show off immortality? Out of all of the ways, how did you land on the way that you decided to do so?
That has changed over time, over the development of this story. So I
Yeah.
got this idea originally probably, I think I've been saying like 15 years ago as a like conservative estimate, but it's probably a little bit longer. When I
Hmm.
first started writing, it was around that time frame. And originally, so he gets stabbed through the head with a fireplace poker by his assistant. Originally, the assistant, in my first draft, the assistant wasn't even in the room. The
Yeah.
assistant was a different type of person. It was much more of an older male assistant, and instead now it's a young woman who is kind of his muscle. And the assistant leaves the room, and Braith shoots himself in the head. And I kind of thought that's not, as impactful as that is, somehow it's not interesting enough. And
Hmm.
then I had him with a very ornate like knife that he had like picked up in his travels or what have you, stab himself in the throat and pull it out. And again, I was like, that doesn't do something for me. And then I thought this idea of him being stabbed through the head rather suddenly and abruptly, um, by his assistant in something that is both planned and yet they're not quite on the same page, hopefully is like really striking and stunning when the reader gets to that. Even as if you've heard this interview and you know this information, it's not much of a spoiler. It's in the first chapter, but I wanted it to be impactful to the reader,
Yeah.
and then I also wanted it to feed into some things that develop later on in the book as we learn about the nature of the relationship to a certain extent between Braith and his assistant Remy, and
Hmm.
then that feeds into how Shyla goes about her investigation as well. And so it just became through trial and error and repeated, let's try it this way, let's try it that way. It became something where it's like, this is a way to do it that's a little bit more fun, but it also serves the story and serves the characters the best. And sometimes that's just the nature of writing, is the rewriting and reprocessing part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, not none of my questions are normally like very broad stroke questions. This is one of the most specific
But
questions that
that's
I've
no,
ever
you know
asked.
what though? But that's like the first of all, most people don't ask the specifics, so I really
Yeah.
like that. So like, if you want to ask one nitpicky question of
Yeah.
everybody you interview, or just do nothing but it, that's really cool. I think actually, because writers don't get to talk about that often, and this is the
Well,
first time I've even had it. As soon as you said that, I was like, oh, I get a chance to like really think about how I approached this, and I haven't really thought explicitly about that for a while. So then, like, as soon as you said it, I was like, oh man, I remember when I just had him pull out a gun from his desk drawer and shoot
yeah.
himself in the head, and it was kind of like, that feels a little bit boring in a weird way. Let's try something new. And then it got to the knife and all this other stuff, and it was like, that really illuminates the process in a
Yeah.
way that the broader questions, which are a lot of fun to talk about as well, but when you get into the deep dive, which is pretty rare for writers, I think, in my when I listen to interviews and when I've had to do my interviews, it doesn't come up that often. But I think we all kind of wish somebody would like
Yeah.
ask some of those
Well,
specific questions.
it's such a fine line because you never want to spoil, but like you said, this happens in the first chapter and it's like pretty much in the
Mm.
synopsis, so like I figured it was fair game. But the thing about this scene in particular with this book is that one, I do love Shiloh, but I think Remy might be my favorite character in this book because I find her endlessly fascinating. And I think, this scene that you talk about, that you have three main players here. You have Braith, you have Remy, who again are kind of both in the know, but not entirely on the same page. And then you have Shyla, and you're trying to convey the level of shock to the reader of that Shyla's, experiencing of not only the violence that unfolds before her, the recovery of it, but where Remy falls into this.
Hmm.
And it's such a compelling setup, I think, that honestly kind of dictates the rest of the novel and how Shyla thinks of these people that she's working for.
Hmm.
And this is largely a PI novel as well as a horror novel, which I want to have so many thoughts about that as well. But I think it's to me, from that character setup about who's in the know, who sees what, and how their reaction to it, those three simple things in that one scene just set the tone for the rest of the book. And I'm curious if it felt that way. And you said like you had different versions of this, and so I'm curious if those iterations brought you closer to the rest of the book, like fully realized, or like how that felt for you to write something so jarring off the bat.
I mean, it definitely it brought me so much closer once I realized I got that scene right and I got
Hmm.
the interplay with those characters right as much as I wanted to, and I realized the role that Remy was going to play for me, which is kind of a little bit of a wild card. This book,
Yeah.
in certain ways, is my obviously, like you mentioned, it's a detective novel, and
Hmm.
it's my love letter to a lot of detective novels that I love. And in particular, one of my favorite books of all time is Devil in a Blue Dress. And if anybody's ever read Devil in a Blue Dress, the lead character is Easy Rollins, the detective. He's a wonderful, interesting character. Probably most people's favorite character, whether you've seen the movie or read the book. He has a sort of friend, but a very much a wild card named Mouse. And if you see him in the film, he's played by Don Cheadle. Just a remarkable character. And he's probably everybody's favorite. You don't know kind of what he's going to do. You don't know exactly whether Easy should be working with this guy or not because it feels like he's going to get him into more trouble. The relationship that Shyla has with Remy is not quite the same because Shyla has her own friend who's a direct assistant named Jen, and nonetheless she has to, for getting back to Braith and reporting back to Braith, her one of her primary contacts remains Remy, and then at a certain point Remy takes a more direct involvement in the investigation. And I wanted Remy to have a little bit of that feel. She's not quite as funny as Mouse is in Devil in a Blue Dress, but she has this weird wild card energy, this dark side, where she's helpful and useful, and yet at the same time also feels like she could be the thing that derails everything
Yeah.
and brings more of a threat to the situation. And so I'm writing to always try to make every character somebody's favorite character, but I could totally understand Remy being somebody's favorite character after patterning this idea on this the character of Mouse from Devil in a Blue Dress. And so after establishing that in that first chapter, after going through those iterations, it does help to lay out everything else. It's like, okay, I understand the nature of the relationship Remy's going to have with Shyla based on this, the nature of the relationship she's already had with Braith, the nature of Braith's relationship with both of them going forward, and knowing what I know about what I'm going to unveil as well.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot of fun discovering those things, and especially fun and blessing when you're able to discover those things early, as opposed to I've also experienced with books that are mostly unfinished. I don't think I've experienced this with any of the three that I've finished so far, but getting like halfway through and you're like, actually, this character doesn't
Yeah.
really work. Like, or
Yeah, yeah,
this
yeah.
this situation doesn't work. I guess with the Spite House, but that was my first book. But with the Spite House, that happened. There was like a police officer character, a police chief, that I just totally excised
Yeah.
from the Spite House because I was like, this person doesn't really fit the role, and so I just had to disperse his plot elements to other people, and it's a little bit of a work to do that. But otherwise, yeah, it's a lot better when you find that out early on.
Yeah, I imagine so. And like having such a strong set piece, it really, I feel like it anchors a story in that way, and it's so memorable in that way. And I kind of want to zoom out a little bit more now, just to talk about the PI and the mystery,
Mm-hmm.
narrative of this and all that. Because one, I am like, I not so much in my fictional reading, but like in television and movies, I've always been a sucker for a strong female lead in a detective PI role. Like I will out myself, I am like a huge Veronica Mars nerd from back in, the CW days or whatever network that was on. And there was also a procedural show that was on ABC. It was called Castle, and there was
Oh
like a
yeah,
very I adored that show. And the thing about a PI narrative, as opposed, or like even a detective narrative in this sense, but as opposed to like your straightforward procedural, is that there is a doggedness to them, there is a savviness to them, there is a rawness to them. Because 9 times out of 10, it's personal. They're getting
yeah.
involved in what they're getting involved in because there's a personal part of this. And you do that with Shyla, given that Braith is like, hey, I need you to look into this for me, not only one, for the money, but two, I know more about you than, you think that you do. So how does that feel to kind of marry, police procedurals, or I shouldn't say investigative procedurals
Mm.
are very logical stories, like from A to B to C, deductive reasoning, all that good stuff, right? But then you take something so personal, like a revenge narrative or a traumatic past, or like the whole entire reason that a character is doing something, and you insert that into that very logical narrative. I imagine it's not an easy marriage of the two, but it's so compelling whenever you get it right. So like, what was that like for you to kind of bring those together for Shyla?
It was great because it gave the character kind of this natural conflict.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that will probably make this feel a little bit different from a lot of the more traditional investigative procedurals, like you mentioned, in noir, detective noir,
Hmm.
books and stories that I've absolutely loved. But there's, I mentioned earlier the detachment that fans have. There's a detachment often that these types of detectives have
Yes.
in a lot of these. Like you said, it's cold and logical. Even if there's a personal element that develops, there's so many of these books where it's like, oh, the person investigating, they fall in love with the femme fatale, right? Or they at least get a little smitten with her, but they find out she's involved, or maybe she dies, or something happens, and then they just kind of get over it pretty quickly because the whole
Hmm.
point of it is this is hard boiled, and this is like, hey, you got to be able to walk away from certain things, and there's an element of that with Shyla, but at the same time, she actually has a greater depth of feeling and greater attachment. And I'm able to then show how much more difficult it is for her to be this PI when these things intersect, because it's hard to remain objective and detached when it does get personal, and it's hard to just stick to the logic. And then on top of that, things are happening that are illogical. There are supernatural
Yeah.
elements that are
Yeah.
happening right away. And so she's trying to focus on, okay, let me just get facts together, get clues together, research, make observations about what I know about a certain building, and I know about a certain location and things that I've learned, and doing the proper research. And then that's smashing up against, should I even be doing this because I have people I care about that could be impacted? And then, is this approach even going to be effective?
Hmm.
Because I'm way out of my depth here. I'm out of anybody's depth because of the bizarre nature of what I'm investigating. And so it was wonderful to actually introduce those elements to the investigative procedural, because it, to me, it enriches, hopefully, the
Yeah.
story and the character, because these things are not supposed to you don't think of these things as meshing well. It's for me, it's I just ordered. I became a big popcorn guy as I
Yeah.
got older. Right. I promise I'm gonna bring this analogy together.
Oh, we could
When I
just
was a
talk about
kid,
popcorn if you want.
I mean, it's flavored popcorn is the best. I'm old enough though. When I was a kid, popcorn was just like you put butter and salt on it, and you go to the movies, and that's it. And like the popcorn I just ordered, one of my orders was like bacon cheddar,
Oh,
and I'm
wow.
like, the idea of bacon and cheddar and popcorn being a mashup when I was a kid would have been like, what in the world are you talking about? And then I'm like, I actually know. I know that this is great. Also, I got a jalapeno cheddar one, and it's like I like all the good stuff, and like those are the relatively simple flavors that I have seen at the place that I order from. And my point being, everybody talks about like chocolate and peanut butter is kind of the analogy whenever they talk about mashing things up, and it's like that one
Yeah.
always seemed a little obvious, but maybe that's just to me because as far back as I can remember, Reese's existed, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like this is like a newer thing, and it's sometimes you add ingredients and some stuff that seems like it's going to make sense and hopefully mesh doesn't. Some stuff that seems like it would complement is just adding too much of the same, and so that goes into overkill. And then sometimes you find out that these things that shouldn't maybe mesh create an interesting flavor and an interesting new flavor combination that becomes your favorite thing, and it becomes cold, logical, procedural, investigative, mashes up against this personal journey and these emotional reckonings with revenge and the supernatural, and they all meet up together, and you get bacon cheddar popcorn, and hopefully everybody loves it.
I love that analogy. That's a really good one. I love that. No, you're right though. And the thing about it, particularly with horror and kind of like the mystery marriage that I feel like we've been seeing more and more of it lately, and I'm all
Mm,
for it because I really, I before I read horror, I was a tried and true thriller mystery reader. Like I did not read
mm,
horror, and then I ventured onto this side, and now I'm here. So I always really get excited whenever the two meet up and they're done really, really well. And I know for a lot of people, it's a hard thing, like you said, to mesh the two because they don't seem like they would go together. But again, I think without that personal touch, though, I remember getting so fed up with certain like narratives where like I felt like a character moved on too quick. And
mm,
like you
mm.
just saw the most dramatic shit
Right.
and you just like, okay, just another wit and like, no, that's not to me that doesn't feel human. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel like your humanity's on display at that point. And so it was always really important to me, like for me to feel like I was reading something that I really enjoyed, that the humanity was there. Like if there was something really upsetting, that the time and space was dedicated to it.
Yes.
And like obviously with Shiloh's predicament, I'm just going to allude to it as her secret, which is, I'm not going to say
Mm-hmm.
what it is, but it takes up a huge part of this book, and it kind of defines why Jin is involved and like how their relationship changes as the story, unfolds. So I think it's really important that even though it's not positive humanity, the like grief or the shock or the whatever is on display in these kind of stories too. It can't all just be sunshine and rainbows or dogged beat for beat mystery. That's just not interesting to me?
No, I totally get it. So I'm gonna. You said that, and my brain just sparked with the classic example that I've conversed about with a friend of mine, and I'm gonna go ahead and name it because like
Yeah.
I'm in that mood for whatever reason not to dance around it. And also this film did exact like crazy numbers, so it's not like I'm disparaging something that I don't like talking bad about something that is like somebody's creative endeavor that was unsuccessful. Like this is
Yeah,
very
yeah.
successful, so like they're fine. Um, and I liked most of it, but the film The Black Phone,
Okay, yeah.
and it already has a sequel out now, so I don't feel like there's a spoiler because the sequel, if you've seen commercials for the sequel, you basically know how the first movie ends.
Yeah.
So this kid gets snatched up by the grabber, the killer,
Hmm.
and it's this amazing kind of narrative, and they're able to extrapolate from Joe Hill's short story, which is much more just kind of a little bit surreal and
Yeah.
bizarre because that's
Hmm.
Joe's style, I think, in a lot of respects, and it kind of places it in as much of a palatable narrative for mass consumption as possible. But then by the end, he kills the kid, escapes wonderfully, finds out ghosts exist, kills the serial killer who had kidnapped him, has a reckoning with his abusive father, finds out his kid sister is also probably
Psychic.
psychic.
Yeah.
And the first movie ends with him going back to school, and like the girls there are kind of whispering, "That's the kid," and he's kind of like. Before he was unpopular at school, but now they know his name, and he kind of smiles at his desk. And I was like, I remember leaving the theater like, that is the most off the wall ending I would have
Yeah.
expected. This kid should be in therapy. This poor kid has has gone through something literally no other human being, to our knowledge, even would have considered possible. And the denouement is, after all of that, look at him now. Like his popularity is bolstered at school. Like he just threw like the coolest party at school and proved all the bullies wrong. And I was like, this is probably not the ending I would have chose for this film. It's, not the ending from the short story. They had to come up with something. I get that there are difficulties with that, so I kind of understand it. And apparently, I'm in the minority here because I didn't see anybody else really mentioning that ending, make them question anything. And then, though, I felt like the course correction of the second movie kind of assisted with that. We find out he's actually been troubled all this
Hmm.
time, as he should be, like you
Yeah.
just mentioned. Like, he went through this. Don't just get over it. You don't just like, oh man, go back to school and now the girls know my name. I'm the big man on campus now. Nobody better mess with me anymore. You know that I killed a serial killer. It's like this kid should be in a room, at minimum, just writing in his diary about how traumatized he is and how he doesn't know what he's going to do next. And I just thought that was such a weird way to end that first film, and then it kind of course corrected, like I said, I thought in the second film, and it didn't like ruin the movie for me, but it did stand out. And
Yeah.
to your point, that's just like a really popular example of something like that. But to your point, that does, I feel like, happen a lot in the middle of a narrative, at the end, all throughout sometimes in a lot of fiction, whether it's supernatural, whether it's just murder mystery, what have you. And, there's space for that. There are cozy mysteries
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
cozy stories. And so there is space for, like, this is the design of it, for it not to be that serious. But when it feels like for the rest of the movie, this has been treated really seriously. Rest of the story, rest of the book, this has been treated really seriously, really heavy, really intensely. And then at some point, somebody's just over it.
Yeah.
That that just kind of it really conflicts and just doesn't mesh well with the rest of the storytelling. So I think that it's important to kind of maintain a certain tone. There's always a desire to kind of give people something satisfying, and I totally understand that too. But you got to do that while also doing justice to everything that you've created prior to that moment.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like, like if you're thinking about like music and like compositions, like it's the
Mm.
shrill violins and then it just cuts to like a pop song,
Right.
like it just doesn't mesh the same way. Because I remember feeling the same way about the sis. Like it wasn't so much whatever, I can't remember his name in the movie. It's been a while since I've seen it. But I remember feeling that way about the sister. I'm like, how would you feel to be like, psychic and knowing where your brother's at, can't help him. You're like dealing with your abusive father alone at home, and then we're all good. He's just home. Oh, Finney, that's his name. Finney's home.
Yeah.
Everything's fine.
Yeah.
Like what the shit? Yeah, I agree. And I think in particular, like I don't want to say I understand, like, because I think that there's more constraints in the visual medium because
Mm.
one. I think unfortunately, people's attention spans are just diminishing. So, it's about being concise to the point. And that's like, I hate that so much. But, to the point of like fiction, there is the like actual space for that. And so I'm always for going the extra mile to like keep your humanity in written fiction because like it doesn't have to be, an hour and 20 minutes, whatever it is.
Right.
So I think it's really I really enjoy whenever the character work is as strong,
Mm.
in a narrative like this where we could just be like really, just glaze over it. We could just move on. It could be hard, and we could just say that that Shyla's, just she's dealt with it before. Like she's just a hard character. Like no,
Right.
she feels a lot, and that's really important too. And I think it's really important that like all of the choice to have Shyla, Jin, and Remy kind of be I don't know if that they're the three main characters, but they're the ones that stuck out to me. And like they're the vehicle by which we're absorbing the story for the bulk of the book. And I don't want to ask, well, why did you choose to write female main characters? Because like that's not the question at all. I guess my question is like how in writing a female main character like all these, because they're all very different. They're not the same. They all have different personalities and issues that they're dealing with. What about this story in particular spoke to you to write women in this way? Because I think with a PI novel, it would be very easy to write a man who is just very like just tough and like that's what the narrative has been for a long time. And
Yeah.
so I'm always interested in the choice to tell this story through a woman's eyes and her experiences.
So, I wish I had a like more profound answer than this that makes me sound more intelligent. The answer is basically I kind of got lucky,
Yeah.
and I say that because the initial version, like I said, this idea's been around for a while, and so many different iterations of it. So my initial iteration, the lead detective, was a male,
Hmm.
and the problem was he was a tall, light-skinned black male, which is me. And I was like, I can't. I'm not going to be the person who does self-insert fiction. I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. So then my brain, I've had to do this a couple of times where it's like my first main character idea is something that I recognized I'm just writing myself. And I was like, okay, how do I flip that? What can I do to get as far away from me as like reasonably possible, right? So I was like, okay, make it a woman, queer woman.
Mm-hmm.
So then, if it's a queer woman, she'll have a relationship, and so then that brings in her friend, that brings in Jen, who's also partner in the sense of the investigation, partner in the sense of they have a romantic history, but there's layers to that,
Yep.
and then Remy being a woman, as opposed to, like I said, the older male assistant,
Mm-hmm.
was for Braith initially. I I was initially writing the older male assistant because I was doing kind of a Saxon Braith was almost like a parody of Batman in my
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
So the older
Gotcha.
male assistant was Alfred,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and I was like, this is probably too cute. And again, the way my brain works is like, okay, if I realize maybe this is not the path I want to go to, this isn't the best idea, then it's like pivot towards something that is, I don't want to say literally opposite, but get as far as reasonably away as possible from that. So instead
Mm-hmm.
of old male, younger woman, simple. But then once you establish that, then it just comes back to I need to do justice by these characters if I'm going to do justice by this story. And why am I writing this if I don't want to do justice by everything? And so then it becomes I need to make sure that I'm attentive to the nature of the relationships, both in terms of everything, the relationships, their interaction with the world, the observation that other people are going to have with them, everything about that. I'm fortunate enough that I feel like 3 books in, I haven't messed. I don't want to say I write women well. I've been told that. I always feel like that's a weird compliment. I'm appreciative of it.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
also kind of weird because why shouldn't I?
Yeah,
Why
yeah, yeah, yeah.
shouldn't anybody write? If you're going to write about these people, write them well. If you're going to write about anybody,
Yeah, any character should just be a good
any
character.
character,
It shouldn't be
try to write
like a
them well.
good man, good woman. Yeah, yeah.
Right. And if you can't, because I have blind spots
Mm-hmm.
about a lot of different things. If I was, for whatever reason, I wanted to write a character and I wanted to make them Australian, right? I probably don't know shit about Australia, really, in any kind of meaningful way to do justice by the character. So I might need to just recuse myself
Right.
from writing about that until I learn more. So hopefully I've learned enough about people around me just from interacting in society and having genuine friendships. I've been asked before about this. I never know how to respond, and I know I'm rambling now,
Yeah.
but it's the truth. It's just like people have brought it up to me, and they're like, do you have good relationships? Like, do you have women that are you're friends with? And I'm like, well, yeah, doesn't everybody? And I know that's
Yeah.
not true, but it just seems so bizarre to me for people to be like, wow, like I can't believe you can do that. So to me, it's even if I didn't have that capacity, though, right? Even if I didn't have it
Mm-hmm.
from the standpoint of just what I've lived experience wise. We do live in a time, I do feel like, if you want to do better in terms of like, I created this character, I need to learn more, it's never been easier to go online and find somebody's blog or vlog or various video interviews, what have you,
Mm-hmm.
and be able to like assemble
Yeah.
the characteristics and the stories and the traits that are going to enhance this person, this fictional person you're creating. I know in the Spite House, initial feedback I got was that they loved the teenage daughter Des, but they
Mm-hmm.
thought she didn't speak enough like maybe someone her age would.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm a man in my mid 40s. I wouldn't know, but like you can go online. It's like, okay, what's the slang? What are
Yeah.
kids
Yeah.
saying? What are
Yeah,
what
go
are
on
vocal
TikTok for
patterns?
yeah, go on
Right.
TikTok for 15 minutes, you'll get it.
Exactly the research is at your fingertips, which is, I mean, I don't want to turn it to a whole different rant, but it's like this is part of why beyond the theft and the damage to the
Oh yeah.
environment and everything else of AI, it's just like what's the point? You don't even want to fucking write.
Yeah.
It's never been easier. Like I part of this story, part of Dead First takes place in Galveston, Texas. I wanted to, and it's relatively close enough of a drive for me. I could have gone
Mm-hmm.
and researched it, but there was a specific part of Galveston that I wanted to get to, and I was like, this is like parts of the island that are like, hey, off limits, roads closed, potential flooding, but there's old forts and stuff here, yada yada.
Yeah.
There are urban explorers who like do drone shots and stuff of that, right? And I can
Mm-hmm.
just go online and search that and watch those YouTube videos and be like, okay, boom, boom, these are the details I'm going to pick up from it, yada yada. So I don't even have to leave my computer to do that. So
Yeah.
like I already feel partly guilty that I can be that lazy about it. Asking the computer to write it for you, what are you even doing? Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to write at that point, so just leave it alone. Leave it to the people who actually want to do it. So anyway, so I know I went off on that little tangent there from your
No, but
from your complimentary question, and I apologize.
no, it brings up a good point because one, there's a couple things I want to hit on. Is one, I always do kind of feel weird being like, well, why did you decide to write a woman for this? Like that, it feels like a weird question to ask. But in particular, like with this narrative, I just feel like a lot of like noir and detective fiction
Mm-hmm.
has been very like male focused. So, picking up Dead First and seeing like, oh, we have Shyla, who's this really complex character who's carrying a lot with her, was so nice and refreshing because, like I said, those are the narratives that I've always been drawn to, like in television and movies and stuff like that. But I think, like to your point, like if you want to do justice by the story that you carry within you that you want to tell, you have to empathize. You have to put your,
Mm-hmm.
your feet in somebody else's shoes. And like you said, it's never really been easier to be able to go out and experience those things, even if your means are limited, like you said, like you can't get on that island in Galveston, and
Right,
like,
right.
but there are ways to get around that. And I think, and horror in particular, I mean, I think it's all a big exercise in empathy. Like we're trying
Mm-hmm.
to extend ourselves to a place that we're not currently in. And I've had this conversation with a few authors recently because a lot of times I feel like a lot of feedback that authors see like in reviews, or at least like a lot of the conversations I've been hearing, is that, people are pissed whenever the book is like not what I expected.
Oh yeah.
But whenever, I said the day that I start picking up books and they're exactly what I expect is a real sad fucking day because like how boring would life be if we weren't, pushing outside of ourselves to,
Mm-hmm.
like live this life that we don't know. Like the whole entire point of art and creativity and all is to escape for a while. So like let's go escape to somebody else that's maybe not like me. I have
Mm-hmm.
a few things in similar that are similar to Shiloh. Like we, you know, both really love a good mystery and we're both women, but I can't say that I have the same, past trauma that she has, and that's okay. I want to learn more about that though. Let's sit with her and let's be present for those conversations and those internal thoughts that she has about that. So no, I'm right with you with the frustration on the AI thing because I just think it's a huge disservice to like what we're doing here to begin with. Like what's the point?
I don't understand. I literally can't wrap my mind around not wanting to do the thing. The whole
Yeah.
point of me writing is to do the damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's it. That's the joy of it. That's the fun of it.
I was about to
And
say the
I'm
fun
not one
of
of those
it
people who's
is,
like, like, oh, I don't like the actual writing process. I actually do. And
yeah,
yes, there are frustrations with it. There's frustrations with anything that's worthwhile to do, just about.
yeah,
But once you like have breakthroughs and once you develop things and you can go back and say, oh, I remember the process where it started from here and I turned it around to this and I got this idea to incorporate this. That is the joy. It's not even just part of it. That is it. That's the thing. Like
yeah,
you're robbing yourself of the opportunity to discover and better yourself. Like what
yeah.
like you don't know even what you're missing out on. It's so great. You're looking at a picture of a sunset and you're like, that's good enough. That's the same as like going and walking outside and looking at the
No.
sunset for myself. It is definitely not the same thing.
No, it's not. And it's almost like a test in resiliency too. Like people don't understand the gratification of resiliency, like pushing
Mm-hmm.
through the thing that's challenging and like getting on the other side of it. And
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of it's easier said than done, but at the same time when it comes to writing in particular, it's like I'm with you 100%. But I do want to bring up one thing that you brought up. You brought up Galveston, which is a big
Mm.
set piece in this book, by the end of it. And a big part of this book is this huge hurricane that had hit
Mm.
Galveston and, completely decimated the area. I live in Louisiana. I'm from south of New Orleans, so
Okay.
I'm
Oh yeah.
intimately familiar with hurricanes. And I think it's such you write a lot of your books like with this like ingrained history, and so like
Mm.
having that aspect to it before we even get to like how it affects the plot and like why Shyla is there and like how it's going to affect what she's going to be doing over there. It already does so much. And so I wanted to talk to you about like the role of history and like natural disasters or like things like that kind of already lay the groundwork for you because I feel like I've heard you talk about it before. You talk about how you're a Texas horror writer. So like a lot of Texas history
Mm-hmm.
dictates like a lot. It does like it's so interesting to kind of pull those threads to lay down the groundwork for what you're going to continue to explore. I feel very similarly about like Louisiana because we got a bunch of weird shit over here. So
Yeah.
I'm always interested to hear you talk about, what you choose to kind of like, I don't want to say fixate on, but, really
Mm.
explore in your stories, like this.
No, it's okay to say fixate. I mean, when I was younger, the things that I was really into as a boy was like dinosaurs. You can the basic boy stuff, right? Dinosaurs and ninjas, right? Or like
Yeah.
I was the '80s kid. That was the era of that. And then I grew up on the Mississippi Gulf Coast,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Ocean
Yeah.
Springs, about an hour away from New Orleans.
Yeah.
Drive. Hurricane season would come around right around the time you're starting school. We'd get into the big, like the cafeteria or an auditorium. They'd give
Yeah.
us a lecture on it, what to watch out for. Bring home the hurricane map, a physical map at the time to like your parents. Make sure you have an escape plan. You know the routes to evacuate.
Yeah.
Yada yada. And it was like this. Hurricanes were like this specter to me.
Mhm.
They were almost feeling supernatural. They have names. They come through out of nowhere and they re you know kind of reform the landscape.
Oh
um
yeah, big time.
and so all of that to say, like, that element of the history, these are the kind of things I fixate on. Other things, like you said, in Texas history, since I've lived here, just these elements of what is interesting but spooky,
Hmm.
um what is going to enhance the story. I feel like it's a little bit of a easy kind of cheat code. People say write what you know. Not everything you know is interesting, so it's like I was, the modifier should be write what you know that is actually interesting, and if you don't have anything, learn some stuff that's interesting, so then you can know something interesting. We get a lot of like, there's a lot of I have a whole other rant about writing advice, but there's a lot of writing advice that's like
Yeah.
so it's too basic. Like there's a lot more nuance to
Yeah.
this.
No, you have to think about
Um,
the advice, not just take it. You gotta
yes,
apply it
exactly,
correctly.
and apply it correctly and maybe make modifications to it, as it pertains to whatever it is that you actually want to write. And it's okay to write something you don't know if you just, again, do the work to learn something about it. But anyway, the things I did know about Texas history, or things that I just ran into, like you said, there are things in the stories that I've developed that is beyond even Texas history or just general history. The Spite House came about because I read about an article about spite houses, and I wanted to write a haunted house story, and it was like, this is a perfect setting for it. So
Yeah.
now I need to adapt it to my story about haunted houses and history, curses, and just developing and learning things. And then as I do more research, if there's a better idea that comes along, using that instead. Sometimes having to curb my indulgences. So that's why I say it's okay to say fixate, because as I mentioned earlier, I'm looking around my office. I've got all the horror stuff. This was not horror and not mystery, is largely natural disaster based or some
Yeah.
kind of disaster based. I've got a book on Texas disasters that I'm looking at over here. I've got more than one book about the Titanic, the Johnstown flood, just all kinds of different stuff, right? Like obscure shipwrecks that people have never even heard about that I'm planning to write a book set on one of these shipwrecks one of these days, hopefully. So I'm really into that.
Yeah.
If I can incorporate it, it's great. But at the same time, like with Devils Kill Devils, my editor came back and with a lot of them was like, "This is really cool stuff. Also, what does this do for furthering the story?" I was like, "Okay, I guess I can remove some of it." It's got to be pulled out of me. I get it, but it's just, I think, really cool, a cool way to approach it, because horror,
Yeah.
especially, is naturally, if you're dealing with ghosts, for instance, or even vampires, werewolves, all this lore, it's naturally infused with a historical element anyway. So, like,
Hmm.
what if we bring real history into it? And there's an author. It's kind of me adapting this advice from an author, an English author whose name I can never remember off the top of my head, even though I've written it down, and I apologize for that. I'll try to send it to you after we
Okay.
get done with the discussion here. So if you wanted to, like, I don't know, add it to your show notes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but there's a British author I saw an interview he did, and he talked about using real places
Hmm.
when he writes. He wrote like kind of a dark fantasy, lore based fiction, and he said the reason why I used real places instead of fictional places was because he wanted people to be able to say, "Well, I don't believe that happened, but I can tell you where it happened."
Mhm.
And like you said, there's like a romanticization of horror. And
Yeah.
part of that romance, I think, is this idea of like, this happened here. I could
Mhm.
walk in the footsteps of where they say they saw a ghost. And so I adapt a lot of that to my books. And like to Dead First, it's like you can go to Galveston and say, oh, that side of the island over there. Like I know that this is a fake story, but that side of the island over there, if I drove past where they say the road's closed, and if I actually went into that old abandoned fort over there, that's kind of the location where things went down
Mhm.
ultimately in in Dead First, and where things came to a head. And I could say like this is what Shiloh went through. And you could be in San Antonio and say, well, I don't know if this is the exact hotel he was talking about where Shiloh first ran into like a ghost in the hallway, but it
Yeah.
feels similar, and there's a similar history around this hotel. I wonder if this is what he was talking about, or if I wonder if the names were changed to protect the innocent, but this is basically the place. And I feel like that hopefully adds to that romance and that sensation and that immersion that I'm trying to give people, because that's what I chase for myself
Yeah.
whenever I'm writing horror and whenever I'm reading horror.
Yeah. I feel like in particular you do a really good job of that with location because you've got two set
Mm.
pieces in Dead First that really just gave me the willies. And one of them was like this nightclub kind of like area, but the basement underneath
Mm.
was it's a very immersive scene for a few reasons, and that one was disturbing. And then there was an underground mental hospital slash
Yes.
church. I was like, holy shit, like how much more upsetting like on a horror narrative can you get than that? Idea. And, there's a lot that unfolds there that I won't get into that kind of feeds into that. Like a lot of revelations are
Yeah.
made there for Shyla. So it doubled down on that emotional impact, I felt like. But the big thing, I think, the big focal point of this book that I really remember is Shyla's drive. Her
Mm.
grudge, her revenge, her whatever you want to call it. She's had this thing that's defined her for a really long time. And this is like her secret, again, I'm not going to say what it is,
Mm-hmm.
but the way that you decide to tell the story and kind of her arc and the resolution is really, really powerful, I think, to examining what grudges or the need for revenge or to hold on to whatever this kind of feeling is, this harboring of these strong feelings, and how that serves her or how it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big exploration in this book. And I was curious for you if that was a cathartic writing experience to kind of write about something as heavy as that, through Charlotte. Because like I feel like, her anger was very palpable. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
angry for her. There is a lot that she's been through that you're like, man, that's really fucked up. I too would feel the same. But where she ends up and kind of how things get resolved, it's not an easy feat to pull off. And, it's a heavy emotional toll on her. So I'm always curious how that feels from the writer's standpoint to kind of give birth to all of that on the page.
I mean, it was, gosh, I guess to a certain extent, probably cathartic. Um, it definitely was in. There was a self-examination of my relationship with anger,
Hmm.
because I have a lot of anger within me. Society will do that to you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, and it's I when I'm always it's always weird because I say that I've said that multiple times in interviews now, and it's like I'm saying it, I'm smiling and I'm happy, but it's like I'm talking about, it's because this is my escape. I get to talk about this crazy cool thing, and then it's like back to the real world, and it's like there's a lot of anger, and you're just trying to find joy wherever you can. And
Yeah.
Shyla, exploring that through her, that character, and she has this very good reason to be angry, and she has
Hmm.
this incredible backstory. And I say incredible in terms of like hard to believe, and yet
Yeah.
it's rooted in, again, talking about history, it's rooted in like some pulled from the headlines to a certain degree, a couple of different examples I found of people who experienced the same thing that she had. And so getting to get into that character's mindset, how angry would you be, and then the things you've done to try to deal with that anger, how unfulfilled would you be, and then you're using that anger as fuel for your betterment, but sometimes it's to your detriment.
Hmm.
And then what happens if some source of that anger is something that you have to let go of, and how does that feel, and how does that work? I mean, I had an interesting conversation even with my editor about
Hmm.
where Shy ends up in relationship to that anger. because my editor was like, well, I think she should have a certain, don't you think if this is her resolution for it, then she would have this certain emotion. And I was like, that's not how I would feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
way that it's written, that it ended up on the page, is how she feels is how I would feel. And my
Yeah.
editor was like, she couldn't kind of understand that, but she
Hmm.
like let me go through it. But she was like, I want to have one of these days, I want to sit down and talk to you about this because this is fascinating.
Yeah.
And I was like, I get it. It's a little bit different, but it is, that part of her is definitely a part of me, and so
Hmm.
there was some catharsis in getting to put that out on the page and share that kind of sentiment with the world. But at the same time, I'm hopeful that people will connect with it, but also to a certain extent, it was just interesting and fun for me to be able to kind of have my cake and eat it too, because
Yeah.
I get to give this detective character a really cool backstory and tie that backstory into the main narrative eventually, which I think is always kind of a little bit of a juggling act.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of discussion about people's characters having past trauma just for the sake of having past trauma. Like
Right.
it's
Yeah.
kind of a
Yeah.
shortcut to giving quote unquote depth to a character, and it's like feels a little bit cheap sometimes. But for her, it just felt like this is like a cool. It's not cool. It's horrible what she went through, but it is different, and it's fascinating. And then also the fact that this fascinating, strange history for a private detective also plays directly into how she's going to help solve this case or resolve this
Yeah.
situation. Rather, I think is it was it gave me everything I needed to do. Right, it gave me some emotional catharsis and gave it to the character, but it also let me play in this cool sandbox of creativity and come out with something that I think was really fun.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you ended it the way that you did, like where she's at
Mm,
emotionally with all of it, because I think, like as a woman, I think there's a certain, and I don't think that what I'm about to say is going to spoil anything, what she experienced, and then like on a daily basis, being a woman, your control for autonomy and like being able to make
mm,
choices and like feeling like certain aspects of that are taken away from you, I
mm,
think is something that Shiloh like really struggled with because of what happened in her past, and like that's like tripled with everything
yeah,
else going on, right? And like to have a character like Saxon Braith contact her, kind of dangle that, well, I know your secret,
yeah,
line. It's also taking her choice away again. So like to me, like you can't just let that go. It doesn't just go
no,
away to continually feel like you have your choices ripped from you.
right,
And that's like that you can make a decision about maybe how you're going to look at it for your own betterment. Like I'm not going to get up every day and say fuck the patriarchy because that would make me really upset every day. But there are going to be some days where I do feel that
yeah,
way more than others, and I feel like that's where Shyla's at. Is like she knows that she's doing what she feels like she needs to do. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be all sunshine and roses. Like 3 weeks after whatever it was.
right,
So
yeah,
I'm glad that you left it as it was for her because it's not easy to go through what she went through.
right. Kind of tying back to what we talked about earlier. Certain people go through different types of trauma.
Yeah.
Um, the aftermath of that, I wanted to respect it.
Yeah.
To me, that was like a respectful way of approaching. Even though she has this, I tried to give her this amazing agency, and
Hmm.
really give her a chance to kind of showcase throughout the book her wit, her resourcefulness,
Yep.
and her determination. But at the same time, that's not a cure all for everything that she has gone through in her past and everything that she continues to go through. And like you said, with Saxton dangling the potential of her secret in front of her and her trying to reclaim this sense of I am in control of
Hmm.
certain amounts of my destiny, and even her relationship with Jin and the way
Yep.
Jin kind of inadvertently has placed her in a difficult position and who she can trust in all of these different things. I've wanted to explore all of that. It's a lot of turmoil for her to go through, and then to it would I feel like it would not have been a good move for me to kind of wrap things up in a way where she, one way or another, um, has kind of a clean cut, a clean
Yeah.
break away from all of that. Is like, oh, now she's, in some way or another starting anew, or she is in some way or another kind of like getting to hit the refresh mode on life. It's like, no, these things accumulate. Even
Mhm.
even when you're forced to let go of something, the effect of the accumulation lingers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this whole conversation about her is, I think, why she's so compelling and interesting to me is because she is so strong, and she does find I think that the strongest kind of characters that we see this way are the ones that show that it's not easy, that show that it
Mm-hmm.
is difficult, and then still doing it anyways. Like, that's to me like where you see like the real strength kind of come through is making that
Yeah.
decision to keep going anyway. But you do kind of leave it on a note, and this is a little bit of a cheeky question, I'm not gonna lie. But do you have any temptation to return to her character? Because you throw in like a really cute little nod to like, oh, there's this other thing that you might want to look into, and she, she's like, no, 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 which was cool. I enjoyed that. But
Yes.
is there any temptation from you at all to like kind of keep running with Shiloh's character in the future?
There's a strong temptation for me to run with the people. I'll say the people who survive this story. It's a horror story. I don't
Yeah.
think it's a spoiler to say some people don't survive.
Yeah.
If you've read my previous work, you know that there's not everybody walks out of here alive.
Yeah.
But for the survivors, there is a temptation. There's not only a temptation to continue. I actually have ideas, and
Yeah.
that's to me bigger than the temptation,
Yeah. Yeah.
because there's temptation always to. I mean, like even with the Spite House, there's definitely temptation. There have been offers and
Yeah.
suggestions to me from people who would, basically be able to pay me to continue to write it about those characters,
Yeah.
and it's like that's definitely tempting. But if I don't feel like I have an idea, or I feel like the idea I wrote, this is where it ends and this is where it's supposed to end,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a huge believer in if this is where things end, let it end, because nothing truly does end, right? As far
Mhm.
as like life and everything, until you literally die, and even then your legacy and whatnot, right? But I understand then the temptation people have to continue writing and expanding in certain worlds and with characters, but the story can have an ending point.
Mhm.
And yes, you could go back and dredge up more and reset things, but to me, that's unsatisfying.
Yeah.
And usually it's motivated by factors beyond creativity, and I don't
Right, right,
want
right.
to
Yeah.
fall into that trap. So where I'm at with Shyla and various other characters who may or may not survive dead first is I'm I'm not only I not only have the idea in mind that it would be fun to revisit these characters, I actually already know what I think I would want to do next
Yeah.
if I were to do that, if I were to pursue that. And so that gives me a lot of satisfaction because I
Yeah.
know I can do this, and it's not just a rehash, and it's not just doing it for the sake of doing it,
Yeah, it's like a
or
genuine
doing it
creative. Yeah.
purely for right for other reasons. There's legitimate storytelling that can still come out of what I've created here. And so that's the long-winded answer.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
you're by now we've been talking for an hour. You're used to my long-winded answers, so
oh,
that's the
no, that's
long-winded
what the
answer of
podcasting
yes.
the podcasting narrative is for, the long asides, the long answers, the tangents. But no, it's just like I'm such like an X-Files nerd and like a Fringe, like the TV show
Mm.
Fringe. Like I love those shows.
Fringe.
Yes, Fringe is
Fringe was awesome.
such a good show, and
Underrated.
nobody talks about it. And I miss it. I don't feel like we really
Mm-hmm.
have one right now in the way that we used to.
No.
And so whenever I just feel like your setup is like Shiloh has seen some not natural things occur in the course and scope of
Mm-hmm.
this investigation. So it's like, well, if she's already kind of been exposed and she's willing to play in that sandbox, so to speak, then like what else is she gonna
Yeah.
find? Is was my thought whenever I closed the book. I was like, wonder if there's
Yeah.
anything else to be said there.
There's it's so fun to consider that possibility, and also the thing I would want to guard against, but fortunately
Hmm.
I think I have an idea that would help with that is I don't want to have to feel like I have to escalate things. I'm a big fan
Yeah,
of
yeah.
escalation in horror. I'm a big fan of escalation in fiction in general, where it's like the stakes just keep getting higher and things get worse. My favorite, I've mentioned this on several podcasts. My favorite horror movie is Alien. One of the things I love about it is that through the course of the story, things just keep getting worse. which is amazing to think about because it starts off with the face hugger and the chest burster situation, and then it's like that's the least of their problems. If that was it, that would actually be like preferable compared to where things end up by the end of Alien. And that's amazing as compared to like I love the film Halloween, but Halloween
Hmm.
is pretty much like this guy is a murderer, and by the end, this guy is a murderer.
Still
Now there's
murdering.
like the classic by the climax gives you an escalation point of oh this guy also might not be killable in a conventional way. As things keep going, it's like oh, it's not just that he's a killer, he might be super strong, super resilient, and that's like a surprise out of nowhere, which I think the surprise element of that has been lost on a lot of slashers that tried to emulate the Michael Myers formula, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, it makes me think
The
of
point
Friday
being,
the 13th with Jason. I mean, we had to send him
right.
to space. We had to just keep going.
Yes,
You know?
exactly. It's
Yeah.
like, well, he has to go to Manhattan. It's like they literally said, just, we got to send him on a tour, right?
Yeah.
He's got to go to Manhattan. He's got to fight a
It's
psychic. He's got to go to space. He's got to go to hell. And it's like, you got to keep pumping this stuff up. And so it's like, I don't want to end up in that situation where it's like,
yeah.
okay, Shiloh saw these things, so I got to pump it up the next time
Yeah,
and make
Shiloh
it
goes to
even, the
space.
stakes even bigger. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They got to a point where they felt like they had to put Hellraiser in space. That's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
crazy. It's like it's already
Yeah.
Hellraiser. It's
It's
like
it's
so.
fun for the bit. It's fun for the pop culture, but like for the people who are like wanting horror to be taken seriously, it's a little like, yeah, I get your argument of the
It's
outlandish and
well,
the
it's like it's fine if like honestly like for like you said people that want like horror to be taken seriously. It's like it's one of those things where it's like it's okay for Jason to go to space then or Leprechaun to go to space because they're Jason and they're Leprechaun and frankly like they were never like super duper serious to begin with. But
yeah.
like Hellraiser, I'm like this is Clive Barker
Yeah.
and this is like his idea. And by when you guys started straying from his influence, you started being like, well, we got to like figure out where to take this and where can we go, and
Not
that's how you
space.
end up in the distant future on a space station with the lament configuration, and it's so it gets into all that. So all of that to say, I don't want to feel like I need to have to escalate things
Yeah.
with Shyla just because she's seen something. And I also don't want her to feel like she's over it, you know?
Yeah.
Like I feel like the horror and so then I have to balance that with if she's been through all of this, just because you survived it doesn't necessarily mean you're best equipped to deal with it.
Yep.
And I
Hmm.
don't want you to feel like, oh, like I'm this is no big deal for me. I always think of I haven't seen the movie, so for all I know, I'm wrong. So I want to be very clear about this. Like, this is just my impression from seeing the trailers for
Yeah,
this
yeah.
movie a while ago. I forget what the name of it even is, but it was like the latest Terminator film, and they
Mm.
showed Sarah Connor show up,
Yeah.
and she's like got the shades on, and she just like starts shooting at the Terminator, and she's like not
Phased,
stressed at
yeah.
all. And I'm like, I remember you can have hardcore, but it's still like scared. That's
Yeah.
like where the heart of the story is. Like I remember being a kid, and when she's like her one arm doesn't work, she's having to pump the shotgun with the good arm, and like she's like haggard and desperate looking because she's still scared. Like the stakes are high. This is not just like I gotta save my son. The world is basically gonna end if we don't stop these damn things. And in Terminator 2, she's badass, but also when she sees the T-100 the first time re-arrive, she freaks out.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
by the way, in the first film, Hicks is terrified. Like one of the classic moments in the first film is him ranting to the cameras in the interrogation room that this thing doesn't stop. And he's having PTSD when he's sleeping in his car. He's
Yeah.
having nightmares of the Terminators killing everybody. You need to still have characters be freaked out by the
Yeah.
fact that I'm seeing stuff and I've experienced stuff that lets me know how serious this is. Once they get over it, it's like, why should I, as the reader or viewer, feel like I'm, oh gosh, like this is a really scary or intense situation if it's like this character doesn't even seem like they recognize that this is like the stakes are that high, you know?
Yeah.
Like
Well, I
I
think
think that applies to so many different things.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the same like narrative that, or the part of the conversation that we had earlier with the being true to the humanity of it. Like nobody is going to get over it like that. So I think, but
Right.
I think, it is a really unique space though in horror because I feel like there are a lot of discussions of like, oh, we don't have a lot of horror series. Well, yeah, for that very reason, it's a hard line to walk of doing service because a lot of what horror thrives on is trauma. You can't keep re-traumatizing the same character over and
Right.
over again and expect them to move on to the next installment of the series without carrying the baggage from the last, compounded if we're going to do this correctly. And then on top of that, like you said, you can't keep escalating in a way that feels disingenuous, that feels outlandish,
Right.
that feels, like the spectacle.
Right. I feel like if you're going to do it, strangely enough, I feel like the character who, in my mind, one of the characters that sort of they did this well with is just the stories themselves. I think did not do a service to this, but and he kind of starts off with this as this character when we meet him. But Dr. Loomis in
Yeah.
Halloween is kind of like this, where it's like if you're going to keep doing this and revisiting with this character, he becomes so obsessed. Like the trauma is clearly afflicting him to where this is all he can think about is
Hmm.
Michael Myers is out here and he is the embodiment of evil and needs to be stopped. And every time Loomis resurfaces, that was the thing, and he becomes increasingly unhinged and more willing to sacrifice himself if it means stopping Michael, but he needs to be sure that that's going to work. And then, of course, like I said, I feel like the sequels, the stories themselves of the sequels, kind of couldn't match this infusion of the character. To me, that would be like the interesting way to pursue it, though.
Yeah, yeah,
Is
yeah, I
like
agree.
that trauma is again the accumulation of these things. You can't just dismiss it.
Hmm.
I do think one of the favorable points potentially with that we established with Shyla, if we were to continue with this character, she has family, she has friends, she has connections.
Yeah.
If you have people you can talk to and dissipate, because so often, you kind of get kind of putting a bow on this a little bit, but you mentioned earlier like some of the familiar tropes of private detectives, and so
Hmm.
often they're very much loners.
Yep,
And
Lone
they're
Wolf. Yeah.
even if they have friends, it's kind of like, you're at a distance. And we established with Shyla, she has an aunt Tiana that
Yeah, she
sometimes she
talks
just likes
to.
to call and talk to, just
Yeah.
to I just need to get some advice and hear some good news. And it's like, so she at least has some mental health, kind of advocacy in her life that will
Yeah.
help her hopefully process some of these things, and she has benchmarks that she can aspire to help her get over some of her past traumas, and that's kind of where we leave even with the closing of the book. And so there's room to explore that with her as well.
Hmm.
So emotionally with the character, story beats with the character, relationship wise, there's more to explore where I wouldn't feel forced to just have to escalate plot beats
Yeah.
and ideas, and I can actually expand on the character in a way that's meaningful. And if that meant doing another book, if anybody wanted to be open to my ideas that I have for it, I'd be super grateful. How many more books that would end up being would
Yeah.
just be determined if I have my druthers on how far I think when is the good satisfying point to end that story.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I have to say, it's very heartening to have this conversation with somebody who has created this kind of narrative. And like, I think it's just super respectful to your characters to think in this way. And it's not like, I know like characters aren't real people, but it's not exploitative. You're not just like putting these fictional characters through shit for entertainment value again and again and again. I think, like being true to like where they're at, psychologically with, all that they've experienced and carrying it into the next and all like that is a key focus, I think, that really, the empathy of it all, of moving it forward in a way that is caring and profound and not just for entertainment value is really important. So this is a very heartening conversation, I have to say.
Thanks. I mean, like, look, this might come back and bite me in the ass too. I have to acknowledge this right now. Like, if 10 years from now somebody comes with a bag and I sell out, I give you permission to like point at me and be like, "You fucking sell out." You looked at me through the Zoom, and you were like, and
I'm
now
writing
like
down the date and time
it's
now.
you've written this is like the 25th installment of the Shyla Sinclair mysteries. she's on the goddamn moon.
The day that Shiloh goes to the moon, I will send you an email. Oh
Yes.
man, that's good
Oh, you
shit.
forgot where you forgot where your roots are, man. You forgot where you came from. Yeah, yeah. I need somebody to keep me in check. So this is now in the ether. This is out there.
Yeah,
So hopefully
it's on
that'll
the record.
that'll keep me from the other types of temptation of continuing the story.
Oh, oh, that's good shit. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, one, for answering all of my questions and just like being so thoughtful and present with all your answers. I do want to ask, what does your year look like in terms of like, are you doing a book tour? Like what's on the horizon? What does 2026 look like for you?
Oh man, 2026. I am doing a book tour, starting the 10th, for a couple of weeks. I'm going to Arkansas, a bookstore in Arkansas. I'll be in North
Mhm.
Carolina. Then I come back to Texas, and I'll kind of make my rounds through some bookstores I'm familiar with in Texas. Information on my book tour is on my Instagram page at Compton
Yeah,
Writes.
I'll link
You
all
can
that.
also go to my website johnnycompton.com and get that. I'm also trying to do some festivals. I've already been invited to a couple. I think I'm not allowed to announce a few of them, but I have already been announced for. There's a festival up in Michigan, called, I believe it's called Third Coast Book Festival, up Michigan along the coast. I've been that way before. Absolutely love it. It's run by the bookstore itself is called the Bookseller.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Seller as in Cellar, and they're supposed to have just a. I know they're going to have myriad authors, and a lot of people are going to be coming through. And I've been through that area before and been invited out by them before. Absolute blast. So I'm looking forward to that. And then there are several more that I've been attached to. I'm trying to think what else I've been announced for that I can say. I think I'll be at Nikon, Camp
Mhm.
Nikon, and also Creepaway Camp. So I'm going to two different
Oh yeah,
horror
yeah.
themed authors going to camp events, which is a little scary for me because I've never been camping and I'm not a camping
Oh
kind of
man,
person. And like I
not one but two
presumed,
then.
yes, and like I've had people tell me like at least Camp Nikon. I think Creepaway Camp. This might be the first one, but Camp Nikon. I've had some friends tell me like like it's kind of like pretty close to real camping. It's not like super duper real camping, like you're not under the stars, but there's like the bunks and everything like that. And I was like, oh, like I just assumed they were saying camp, like euphemistically, but we're all just gonna really be in, hotels or bed and breakfast or something, and then like we just take a hike into the woods and tell some stories, and then go back to our creature comforts. And they're like, no, bring a personal fan because it might get
I,
hot in your
I
unconditioned, your
cannot wait
non air
to
conditioned. Yeah.
I cannot wait to follow up with you in like 6, 7 months after
I
this.
mean, I'm also like a large human being, so it's like stuff is like not built to accommodate me. Generally speaking, I'm 6'4". I take up a lot of space, so it's like I'm sure these bunk beds that they've told me about are not going to be adequately structured for someone with my build. But we'll figure it out. It's only
Yeah.
for however long. I'm sure it's going to be a blast. Everybody also tells me it's a lot of fun, so I'm going to that. And yeah, just keep watching my Instagram and my my website johnnycompton.com, and I'll be updating my comings and goings there. And then on the writing front,
Yeah.
in November, my first sci-fi horror novella comes out. It's called
Hell yeah.
Chimera Skin. It's
Yeah,
coming
yeah,
out
yeah.
through Shortwave. Shortwave is amazing. I've
Yes.
seen the cover. I haven't been given clearance to release the cover yet, but I freaking loved it.
They kill
Like I feel
their
like,
covers are
oh,
phenomenal. Alan is truly,
Alan's great.
yeah, a phenomenal
Alan's
human.
awesome, and Alan sent me that cover, and like I genuinely felt so good when I saw it. I was like,
Yeah,
this guy gets it.
he
He
does.
gets it, and it's so amazing. And even the tagline on it was amazing. And I was just like, I can't wait to share this with people.
Hell yeah.
And so that should be coming out in November, as long as I fulfill my side of things as far as like getting back my edits and stuff in time. So that's where we're at for my year.
Good. Well, that's all very, very exciting. And again, cannot wait to follow up following your camping experience. And I'm really, really excited to see that cover. I cannot say enough good things about Shortwave. And so it's really exciting whenever I see authors who I'm a fan of like land with them. It's just fun because
Yeah.
like you're such a fan of that publisher and to see
Yes.
the two
I
come
mean,
together is such a good time. So
they do such great work. I'm really
yeah.
proud of and really happy for Alan because they've been through ups and downs, but they've got a really great distribution
Yeah, I was about to say that.
situation. Look,
Yep.
yep, Simon and Schuster. So super thrilled for Alan.
Yeah, same here. That's awesome. Well, Johnny, thank you so much. This has been a real treat. This is like how I wish all of the interviews go. It's just like all these fun side tangents and everything else. But no, I'm really thrilled for Dead First to hit shelves. I think it's a really compelling novel just because it does a lot of the classic beat things, but it does a lot that normal PI novels don't do between the horror, the main character struggles, with Shyla and everything like that. It's just such a good book. So I'm really thrilled for you. Thank you again so much, and I hope that we speak soon.
Likewise, thank you for having me on, Anna. It's been a blast.
A huge thank you to Johnny once again for coming on the show and talking as in depth and as long as he did with me about horror, about his book, about everything in between. I'm not sure if it came across in the tone of the interview, but I was having a ball. If you need numerical values, I mean, you can look and see how long this episode is. I just could talk to Johnny about this genre, his work, and everything anywhere close to that for ages. So I hope that you all enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed recording it. Next week, I've just been having really great conversations with so many people in the horror sphere. It might just be another two release episode week next week. I don't know. We'll see. I'm gonna feel it out. Um, but who knows? There might be two episodes for you all next week. Stay tuned. You'll find out. Until then, though, have a lovely weekend, and I will see you all at our normal scheduled time on Tuesday.